this notion of a startup should be centered around the founder is a mindset, right? It makes for great stories, it makes for great heroes, and that's the reason why that sustains. But there are great organizations that have been built where founders did not believe in that, and the organizations sustain even after the founders leave.
That was Alok Mittal, co-founder of Indifi. I hope you've heard my first episode with him. I often ask founders if they believe in the concept of a founder-led organization or how they're planning for a post-founder future for their organization. Because like Alok, I do believe that just like a parent's role is to eventually step back and let go of their child into the world, so it is for founders and their startups. But that's not easy when we're living in what I'd say is the golden age of founders, where co-founder tags are coveted much more than CEO titles. It's not easy for many founders to let go. But that was just one of the things that Alok and I discussed in our conversation. Alok, if you didn't already know, is involved in a lot of things. His day job might be MD of Indifi, but he's also the founding board member of the Indian Angel Network and the co-founder of Plaksha University. Plaksha is a project he's been working on for quite some time, and the way it is structured was interesting and something a lot of centers of education should be aiming to build in India.
And hence, the notion of departments that exists in education institutions is not the right architecture, right? And then, especially for a country like India, more and more of technology skills have to get expressed as entrepreneurship for it to be relevant to the society. Right? I don't think we have another answer for the jobs we need to create or the growth that we need to build. Now you take all of that, and the question that we are asking is, what does that mean for the university system, right? And so, for example, at Plaksha, there are no departments, right? There are these integrative centers of research which are oriented towards a particular problem, so climate. But there is no computer science department. There is no mechanical engineering department. There is no mechanical engineering major, right? Because we don't think that students will need to be experts at mechanical engineering in a silo to be able to build, right? So there is a major in autonomous systems, which means robotics, which means drones, which means all of that. But there's a major in biological systems, which means genetic engineering, which means personalized medicine, right? Things of that nature. So that is the new architecture that we are putting in place for how technology education should be done.
If you haven't already checked out the first part of my conversation with Alok Mittal, do give it a listen. You'll find in that conversation when and how Alok fell in love with the idea of being an entrepreneur. If you've already done that, then welcome to First Principles. I'm your host, Rohin Dharmakumar. Before we start the episode, I have an announcement to make. Giving back something meaningful to the places that made us is something that we all wish to do. What exactly to do usually becomes a question. I think we might have just the solution. If you value what we at the Ken do, you can now gift it to your alma mater through our Patreon subscriptions. We introduced it on 24th May and have seen multiple subscribers writing to us with requests. Now, what exactly does a Patreon subscription provide? It provides the same premium experience to the Ken that you get as a paying subscriber, but for an entire college, including students, faculty, and staff. So if you or your organization wishes to gift your college the Ken, then write to us using the link in the show notes and we'll get the conversation going from there. Okay, that's all I had. Back to the episode. Alok, you're also a fan of mental models, and you've, like I said earlier, you've been an entrepreneur multiple times, you've been a venture capitalist. You've been an investor, you're an angel investor in numerous companies, etc. What do you, I mean, how do you look at mental models and how do you deploy them, or how do you think about using them at Indifi, especially when it comes to org building and
Hmm.
decision making?
Hmm. So I think one of the pieces that's helpful for me, right, is um, the earlier conversation we were having on how do you want to pick the experiments, how do you want to execute the experiments, how do you want to allocate capital to them. And there, this notion of quick experimentation, but only experimenting what can be big, is one piece that we tend to deploy very, very frequently, right? So, is the risk worth taking? Which is a function of if we are successful, then does it represent a big enough opportunity? So we don't want to be taking risks where even if we win, we don't really gain disproportionately. Um, then can we do as many iterations of this as possible in the fastest possible time? Can we get in front of the customer as fast as we can? Because the belief is that that is where we will learn. We are not inherently a IP driven business, right? We inherently are a customer service business. And to that extent, if you are,
But you did say that one of your differentiators is your proprietary credit models, etc. Wouldn't that be IP?
yeah, that is IP. But
But the
literally,
source of truth is customers, you're
source
saying.
of truth, and the customer service is still what wins us business, right? This will have a disproportionate impact. The IP will have disproportionate impact on our profit and loss, right? Also, if you got 900 people, there are probably 20 people or less who are involved in building the IP, and bulk of the organization is involved in delivering the service. Um, so I think that is one kind of piece that we use, fairly consistently to gate the initiatives, but also drive once we've chosen a particular initiative because we like the upside behind it. Then how is it that we want to experiment, right? How quickly do we want to see results? Um, the organizationally, I think one of the things that has helped us is not to develop functional boundaries, right? So this probably also ties into my earlier comment that we have zero tolerance for politics in the company, right? And the more you get into functional boundaries, the more you get of that, the more you get of, I'm trying to optimize for my own function rather than for the company.
So does that mean there is no marketing function at, or for instance, like
There is a
what was,
marketing function as an execution leg,
oh,
right?
but not
When
the
you're sitting in
organization within it?
there is an organization to execute. But for example, when we are having our weekly stand up, there's no representation saying I'm from marketing, right? People who will get invited there are people who can put the company hat and present ideas and so on at a marketing layer, right? So structures are there, and structures are there to facilitate execution, not to block ideas, right? I think that's the
In your
larger import.
experience in organizations, typically how do ideas get blocked?
So one of those things is this functional view of the business, right? That tends to block ideas, right? So I have a great idea, but uh, you know,
Just
finance.
to be clear, like,
Hmm.
I mean, and to explain to listeners as well, you're talking about, let's say there's product, there's engineering, there's marketing,
Finance,
there's finance,
marketing,
etc.
yeah,
And
yeah,
each one has incentives which are sometimes at odds with each other. Oh, this may work for product, but it's not going to work for engineering. And thus the politics starts to kind of
yeah.
creep
Or
in.
even it's not on my priority, right? So
Hmm.
let's see. I think these problems are worth
Speed of
solving.
execution may be products priority, but not necessarily engineering's
Right,
priority.
right. So I think so. Again, maybe a third one that we deploy, maybe less consciously, but we do. You have to solve all these problems assuming people are well intentioned. See, many times politics will get blamed to someone is a bad person. Someone is a bad person. That's a person issue, right? Now, as a matter of org design, assuming everyone is a good person We still see all of this happening. How do we create an organizational system which, at least in an environment where people are good, right, is promoting collaborative work, is promoting experimentation, right, is promoting founder mindset, ownership towards the business level outcomes. So that itself is a problem worth solving. And
I must
getting
say, I'm
away
not
from,
fully clear about this third point that you mentioned, that solve assuming everyone is good. What
yeah,
does that
you
mean?
got the right people, right? They will respond to incentives, right?
So essentially, you're saying don't blame it on the people.
Don't blame it
The-
on the people. This is a system design issue, right? People evaluation is a completely different part of the conversation. Uh, and to that extent, if my CFO does not have elbow room around profit and loss variability, then there is no way my product team can have the elbow room to experiment, right? So, A, are you driving those incentives, which is kind of the hardware of this? But B, when you're sitting in a meeting, are you expecting people to tell you about their functions, or are you expecting people to tell you about where the organization level outcomes can improve, right? So again, if I take profit maximization as one of the goals that might exist for a company, then is the CFO picking up the mantle on that, or is every leader potentially able to influence profit, and hence it's their job, right? And once you start thinking about it,
How do you do this? How do you, because this is complex, right? Like getting the people in an organization to think beyond their respective responsibilities to, for example, someone say in product, thinking about profit maximization. So what do you
they are great
do?
at it. They are great at it. So this
How?
is
What did you do?
this is how do you use ChatGPT,
Hmm.
right? You need the right prompt. The engine is there, right? But the question is, are you even asking the product guy, right? That, hey, we are looking to increase our profitability this year. And so you have to look at levers that are in your control, both revenue and cost side. And please come back with where are the opportunities that you see. One thing that I realized, and again in JobZ actually, every person in the company is sensitive to, for example, profit. People want to be profitable. Okay. So we had a PN, Sham, right, in JobZ. And he walked up one day and he said, "Sir, आप बहुत खुश हैं आज हम." What happened? कहता, "सर, हम देखते हैं यहाँ पे कंपनी में ना बस चेक बाहर जाते हैं, चेक अंदर तो आता नहीं है, तो आज चेक आया है." Right? So every person in the company has that signal going on in his mind of saying, "यार ये कंपनी कर क्या रही है?" Right? पैसा बन रहा है कि नहीं बन रहा है? पैसा बनना चाहिए. Right? There are people who take pride in a company because customers are speaking well of the company. So every person in the company inherently is motivated towards ensuring customer delight. Right? So I think one thing you have to do is not partition that out. Right?
Do you operate some kind of a framework like OKR or anything
We do.
like that?
We use OKRs, and
For how long? How many years have you been using
3 years
OKRs?
now. Yeah. Before that, we had another system.
Has it stabilized now? Because people go through
Stabilization
OKRs
is
with.
bad. Management systems. If you get management systems to stabilize, you'll end up at the wrong place. Because stabilization means people understand it enough to game it. Not because they deliberately want to, right? But because everyone's trying to achieve their goals, right?
The rise of sandbagging and all of
वो सब
that
हो
kind
जाता
of stuff,
है,
right?
right? So my experience with management systems is you have to replace it every 18 months, right? So OKR may not get replaced, but how we do OKRs may change, and we've done that a couple of times now.
You're essentially learning from past iterations on what
Or
works,
just
what
change it,
doesn't.
or just change it, right? Make it, land it in a zone where people have to think again, right? About what are the loopholes.
So that they don't get comfortable about.
They don't get comfortable about it. There is a new thought process that is coming to them. They see another way to win. See, again, I will back my team to say they want to win. If my team doesn't want to win, then management systems don't matter. But if they want to win, it's our job, my job, to show them how to win. So to your point earlier, if my product team can't see where they can make a profit and loss impact, then we will sit with them and we'll show them of saying, here are the three levers, right, that I can see, and that motivates them enough to find three more, right? But I think the bigger mistake would be to assume that now the CFO will come with the analysis of saying, hey, in the company, these are the 10 things we are going to do. But those are not optimal decisions. They are made far away from the ground, right? Replace X vendor with Y vendor. Give, product vendor negotiation to finance. This is not an L1 system, right? Product managers should be allowed to make those decisions because they understand from a product standpoint what will work best for them, right? And then they have to be sensitive to the profit and loss objectives so that they can negotiate appropriately. Right? So I think breaking these boundaries or not allowing these boundaries to emerge is again kind of one thing that we have emphasized on from an organizational design standpoint.
And are there biases? Are there specific biases that you're trying to steer the organization from, which you found are particularly prevalent or are hard to kind of steer around?
There are some of those, but they come and go, right? So, for example, there is this whole thinking that larger engineering teams make for better pace of development, right? At JobZ, my largest engineering team ever was 8 people, right? At Indifi, we are 30. So it's still, it's several fold smaller than our nearest peers, right? So I think those are the kind of things where there are mindsets, and we target them. But there are many places where you're struggling against an invisible emerging mindset rather than something which is explicit out there, right? Even this notion of a startup should be centered around the founder is a mindset, right? It makes for great stories, it makes for great heroes, and that's the reason why that sustains. But there are great organizations that have been built where founders did not believe in that, and the organizations sustain even after the founders leave. Right.
What is it that truly drives you? You talked about problem solving, but that seems more of like on an ongoing basis. That's what brings you to work each day. Interesting, but on a longer term basis, what drives you?
So I think I see myself as a beneficiary of two things, right? One is education. My father decided to invest in my education way ahead of all other priorities that might have existed. And second is entrepreneurship, right? Where in the early days I got lucky enough to survive and thrive, and then every step along the way. And so if you ask me what kind of investments I want to make outside, right, of myself, those would be those two areas. And that, in some sense, is kind of why venture became interesting, angel investment became interesting, and to some extent, Indifi became interested because this notion of, 85% of India chore hai, that's just not something I can live with. Right? And then on the educational side, similar experiences I've had. I've taught kids personally for about 8 years. Much of the involvement in Plaksha as a university comes out of that. So at some level, thematically, those are the two big drivers for me, right? But to come back to what I want to be doing day in, day out and what keeps me energized, that purely is problem solving, right? If in a day I can get half an hour of high quality problem solving with my teams, that just keeps me going. Yeah.
All right. You talked about education and entrepreneurship. Now, education, well, I guess most people understand it that go for something that you enjoy or study it, etc. But when it comes to entrepreneurship, it's not so clear. There are divergent views on what's should I'm assuming someone who does want to kind of become an entrepreneur. Should you start early? Should you wait till your mid 30s to maybe when you hit 40. There are different competing studies that say some of the most stable and successful long term businesses get made when people turn 40. But there is also this pressure on, hey, you know what, like if you can survive ramen profitability, that can only come when you're in your 20s, because you're not married, you don't have kids, you don't have EMIs, so you can just. What is your advice on people who are wondering what's the right time, if at all, to become an entrepreneur? Is it too late? Is it too early? How would you look at that
Yeah, no,
problem?
I think that again lands up being a very personal question. When do you feel that urge is strong enough? I think one thing that I would advise, and this is very hard to follow, so is do it when you feel like doing it rather than the rest of the world feel like you should do it. But when we are younger, at least when I was younger, it was very hard to discriminate between the two. Right. So I don't have much of advice to offer
By
on
that you
timing.
mean that when you're younger, it's harder to, uh,
Appreciate the differentiate
yeah,
between whether it's
hearing
you who
your
want.
voice versus the external
Yeah,
voice,
that was
like,
my
yeah.
experience, right? And again, I'm just amazed at what kids do these days. They're just so much more, self-conscious at an early age. So I've invested in companies where you have a student entrepreneur, and I had a privilege of investing in Mr. Suta's company when he was over 60. So I've seen that spread. So I don't think it is about how successful that company might land up being, as much as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, what's the connecting thread to someone who's like, you've seen this both as a VC as well, and as, of course, as an angel investor, continuing on a basis, the 25-year-old entrepreneur and the 60-year-old entrepreneur. I'm sure you see some kind of an invisible thread which is kind of connecting many of them, which makes you think that these people are doing this for the right reason. What are those?
I think there is a sense of purpose beyond making money. And when I say purpose, I don't necessarily mean a social purpose, right? It could be a very personal purpose. It could be a sense of, hey, I can do better than that person, right? And while, again, there is enough literature to suggest you should be intrinsically motivated and not extrinsically, I've seen that work, right? So to me, it is fine, right? But it's not just about saying, okay, यहाँ पे opportunity है, then we can build $100 million business, right? What is it really that is driving you? Is that consistent? Is it likely to last? Because that drive is required for that 10-year, 20-year period, right? And you have to be able to, enjoy that journey through that long period of time. So I think persistence is the root of success, and hence, what is really motivating someone to get into this is a question which is important in my mind.
So when you look at people's entrepreneurial journeys and your own, and if you look at, let's say, the first 2-3 years, usually those are so intense that you're trying to survive
Mhm.
and not die. For many businesses, I'm not necessarily implying that it's true
Yeah,
for Indifi
yeah.
specifically. And then there comes this, okay, we did not die, we survived. And this comes a bit of, I think, confidence slash complacence. And then there's so it's like a cyclical, that there's certain comes a time when the people get bored. This is stable, it's not going anywhere. I've, at least in my opinion, I've felt
Mhm.
that this is a cyclical phase, right? Like, like you earlier said, that even unicorns are trying to reinvent
Yeah.
themselves and say, just like you talked about business cycles being cyclical, that you can't assume that you're going to be around, right? Even entrepreneurial energy goes through these phases of, you know, I'm whatever it takes to survive, to
Hmm.
we have arrived, to what am I doing, to Ha- I'll ask this in a personal way. What have been your entrepreneurial energy
Yeah,
phases
yeah.
with Indifi?
So I would tend to think of this in two different pieces, right? So there is this very high frequency highs and lows, right? Those goes through, I might be feeling great right now, tomorrow, same time in the evening, I might be feeling like, you know, the world is falling apart, right?
Yeah.
Um, that is quite different in my mind from this notion of entrepreneurial energy that must persist, which is driven by whatever drives you, sense of purpose, So I think that those two are two different things in my mind. And if you understand what really drives you, then you can create it, right? So what I mean by that is, if I understand that for me problem solving is important, then even within my startup, I'll put myself in situations where I need to do that, right? If I understand that running an operations shop is not what gives me energy, then I will not do it. I will hire someone to do it, right? So I think it's important to understand what is driving you, because you can create that, right? And hence that energy
And that's
can sustain.
part of the beauty of entrepreneurship, that you have a say in designing the organization that you're building, so that in some senses it fits in with your strengths and
Yeah.
desires and purpose as
Yeah.
well.
So if I look at a job environment, you always have a exit option, and hence you can keep creating it.
Hmm.
If you're an entrepreneur, you have an influence option, and hence you can keep
Yeah,
creating
that's
it.
well put, right? Because
Right.
you can shape the
Yeah.
organization that is being built, etc. And
Yeah.
which you earlier said that many times organizations also, the culture starts to reflect the initial founders' culture and what they believed in
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. So there was this phase, where, maybe few years back, where the toughest part for me would be Monday 5 o'clock in the morning, right? Because you have had the whole weekend to ruminate over what's not working, right? And you're carrying this task list in your head of saying ye bhi nahi chal raha, ye bhi nahi chal raha, ye bhi nahi chal raha, right? And I would hit my desk at 8, and by 8:30 I'd be re-energized, because now you're in the solving mode, right? You're not in
the toughest part,
recycling the.
I get it. You're saying it's the toughest part because during the week you
You're
only had time to think, like to let it like stew in your mind, but not get to the problem
not get to the
solving
problem to solve
aspect.
it, right, during the weekend. And then as soon as you're on desk, you're in the solve mode, right? And once I understood about myself, of why is this happening as a pattern, now I don't have those 5 o'clock Monday mornings, because in some sense, maybe I've gotten conditioned to the fact that, hey, 8:30, everything will be
Also,
fine.
probably you're looking at it as that's the necessary precondition for you to essentially move into problem solving mode.
Or maybe parking it,
Hmm.
right? Uh, you know, um,
How do you train yourself to be more self aware when it comes to these things, observing the patterns in what you're doing and being able to get comfortable with like parking it?
mhm.
Like, I'm sure you were not always comfortable with
Yeah,
parking it
yeah.
because there is this inherent desire to, if a problem hits you, you've got to solve that problem.
So it is the corollary of the same sentence that you just said.
Hmm.
If I know the problem, then I'm inclined to solve it, and I have the motivation to execute on the solution. So as soon as I realized what was happening, now think of this as the problem, that 5 o'clock in Monday morning, you're ruffled
So it's
with
a meta
everything.
view. So you're saying that itself was
Yeah,
the
yeah,
problem.
right. That was a problem, right? And then once I realized that 8:30, it goes away because I'm in the solving mode. Now 5 o'clock Monday morning, my brain is telling me that, hey, you know the answer to this. 8:30, things will get solved. So you're not ruminating over it over again, right? So I think it's the same thing.
What's the best time for people to give you feedback at work?
So again, one of the things that we've done is, I have promised to my team that if I have any feedback to give to them, they will get it instantaneously. Not instantaneously doesn't mean in a meeting, but they will never have to wonder what Alok is thinking about them. Positive, negative, right? My team tells me I share more negative feedback than positive, but and I have requested them for the same thing, right? That if you see me doing something which is not fitting in, that is inappropriate, you should feel free and let me know.
Does enough of that happen?
Some of that happens, and I think it's not. Some of the people feel much more comfortable doing that than others in the company, right? So it's person dependent. But yeah, um I think that honesty of being able to give and provide and receive feedback is something that I value a lot, not just at work, but also in my other relationships.
Are there phrases that you're known for within the company?
I don't know. I should check with my people on that.
All right, I'll ask a more sharper version of this. What is a phrase that people dread hearing from you after presenting to you in a review meeting?
Uh, I think one of the things is that if there are holes in data, I'll catch them. Right. So I've heard that they have to prepare thoroughly if they're going to present something because
So is there a sort of Amazon or PowerPoint, like long form versus PowerPoint kind of? Is there any such culture when it comes to presenting at Indifi?
no, I think we have not focused on form a lot. I'm not saying it's not useful. We just haven't focused on that a lot. So we are actually happy for people to come in and talk and
Without any kind of
without
deck
any
or
accessory.
yeah.
We are happy for people to come in and show data on Excel sheets. Uh, I think what we have started doing in specific cases where there is value to archival, there we have started to ask people to put one page or two pagers, and that could be an email.
But
Uh,
just get saved in the system somewhere.
get saved along with the rationale of why, because the hard thing about data is it makes complete sense when you are in context, and when
A
you
month later, it may not.
a month later the same Excel sheet is like, why was I looking at it? So especially with data, it helps us put the right storyline behind it.
Are you paranoid about anything?
Irrelevance. And again, some of these things translate, right? I would be paranoid about Indifi being irrelevant in the scheme of things, right? See,
Hmm.
the biggest failure is mediocrity because you've taken all the risk, but you've not driven the upside. So when I say irrelevance, I don't see in the sense of Indifi crashes and burns. I'm just saying if we'll end up, being
A
one
middling
a
organization.
middling organization, middling business, then that would be the worst case scenario.
Uh, One of the questions that I think this was sent by subscribers as well is that a lot of people ask about what's going to change in the next 10 years. But there's also a counter question to that, which is what do you take as a given that what is not going to change in the next 10 years around which you can build a business? What's a secular trend that you see over the next 10 years?
Yeah, I think at a business layer, not much is changing. At a technology layer, a lot is changing, right? And I say that even as we think about last 10 years and emergence of big tech, for example, you could argue that that is a significant shift in businesses. But overall, in the scheme of things, that's still a blip, right? So consumer behavior is not disruptive, right? It evolves, but it evolves at a certain pace. So I think I like to think of businesses as coming from consumer insights, and that doesn't change quickly. Secular trends, for example, growth of credit in India will continue to happen, right? Because it's just 85% doesn't exist, right?
Is there, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but just yesterday I was reading this very interesting article about how household borrowing in India has
Gone up.
grown
Yeah.
quite a lot and whether it's sustainable or not. Now, you operate in the business lending space, not in the, but I'm sure you have a point of view on what is sustainable. So, if you look at your space, I'm assuming that you're going to say that there is still a significant way to go where Indian businesses are largely under penetrated with credit.
Yeah, and so is household credit,
Hmm.
right? Now, what happens is you suddenly see this high frequency spikes, right? So last 9 months or between June and December of last year, consumer lending was going through the roof, right? Now it's been checked a little bit, so suddenly it will look down, right? But underlying that is the stable growth trend. So that will continue in business lending, that will continue in consumer lending. India is far less leveraged than what we would need to be a 5 trillion economy, right? So that underlying trend is there. Consumer discretionary growth. So I don't think it is hard to identify these secular growth trends behind which you can build the company. Then you want to kind of, in some sense, figure out whether you want to be in a disruptive play or you want to be in an incremental play. And I don't say incremental with any degree of derision. I think it's a great play to be, or let me call it the compounding play, right? And I think that's a choice that again has to sit well with the individual, right? Of what is it that you feel comfortable with? What do you sleep well with? Is it the high risk and the potential to get a high reward in a
So,
shorter period of time?
what would that mean to a potential entrepreneur? More stress, more hard work,
It may be
more
more capital.
failures,
It may
more
be more
capital.
capital. Stress is how we react to situations. So I don't want to imply it would lead to higher stress. That's just personal. But if you are a person, right, where if things are volatile, that imposes stress on you, then yes, it's likely to give you more stress than reasonable compounding business.
Is it the opposite for you? That if things are stable, you get stressed a little bit?
No, I think I like the compounding business. Right now, the question is: are you being creative enough in compounding businesses?
To make a compounding business also disruptive in some senses.
It's not disruptive, right? So Indifi is not disruptive, right? So here's the equation: 85% of small businesses are underserved. If digital lending in aggregate over the next 10 years can reduce that number from 85 to 75, all of us will be big. So in that sense, we are not disruptive, right? There is a certain set of market shifts, consumer behavior, technology, data availability, that we are leveraging to create the next set of businesses, right? But our blueprint of a business model is very, very similar to what lenders have always been doing. So to that extent, we are not disrupting the status quo.
All right. You, of course, are the co-founder of Indifi. You're also an angel investor. You set
Yeah,
up the Indian, you are a co-founder of the Indian Angel
that's correct.
Network as well. And also, you're the founder and trustee at Plaksha University. Tell us more about Plaksha University.
So Plaksha, again, think of it as a startup, which is seeing certain trends in the market and trying to create a delivery model that suits that. What is it that we are seeing? And we are not unique in seeing this. That's the beauty about startup space. I don't think people miss out what the trend is. People miss out where the market is going, right? It's your approach to solving for that, which is different. So technology, as you said, is evolving at a faster pace than ever. So skill obsolescence is a real issue. Uh, Technology product building is getting more and more cross-disciplinary. So if you have to build a drone, you need to know dynamics of flight, you need to know physics, you need to know electronics. Uh, yeah, at least these, if not more, right? And hence, the notion of departments that exists in education institutions is is not the right architecture, right? And then, especially for a country like India, more and more of technology skills have to get expressed as entrepreneurship for it to be relevant to the society. Right? I don't think we have another answer for the jobs we need to create or the growth that we need to build. Now, you take all of that, and the question that we are asking is, what does that mean for the university system, right? And so, for example, at Plaksha, there are no departments, right? There are these integrative centers of research which are oriented towards a particular problem, so climate. But there is no computer science department. There is no mechanical engineering department. There is no mechanical engineering major, right? Because we don't think that students will need to be experts at mechanical engineering in a silo to be able to build, right? So there is a major in autonomous systems, which means robotics, which means drones, which means all of that. But there's a major in biological systems, which means genetic engineering, which means personalized medicine, right? Things of that nature. So that is the new architecture that we are putting in place for how technology education should be done.
How long has it been around? And how is
So
it doing?
the idea of Plaksha in an active format has been around for now about 8 to 9 years. The campus itself has been around for 3 years. Our programs have been around for 6 years. So we started a few programs before we physically had the campus to test
It's in
early.
Mohali.
Yes. And the idea of starting the programs was exactly like a startup. You get into the market, you get feedback, you get more cycles of iteration, because education business is, it's notorious because you don't get as many iterative cycles. Once you launch a program, right, the earliest you get to know is 1 year what happened, and then in a 4-year graduate program, it takes you 4 years to say, hey, I was able to place the first batch that I took 4 years back, and that's one critical success factor, right? So we started some short duration programs well ahead of setting up the campus. And that has provided us with the feedback, that has provided us
So the
with.
first of the 4 years program graduates haven't yet graduated.
No, no, no. So
That'll be next year.
they'll graduate next year, yes. Yeah. But we have graduated 6 postgraduate batches, 1 year programs. And then we have a program for school children, which is really a recreational program, which we've been running for 7 years now.
Sorry, what's that program?
That's the program where we get in school students and,
And expose them to many of
building,
these.
building stuff. So same, if you want to build something, it has to be interdisciplinary. So they come in and they learn things on an interdisciplinary basis, real world problems, right? So it's the same overall mission of Plaksha gets replicated at a school student level. From their standpoint, most students who are in 10th grade don't understand what an engineer does. So this provides them with the, kind of 2-week simulation of what you would do as an engineer, and help them make the right choice. It could be they love it and they want to do more of it, or it could be no, this is really not what I thought it was.
We hear a lot about you as a professional. What's your personal life like? What is personal time for you?
Oh, so I do have quite a bit of personal time. So I normally my work day would be something like 8 to 7, right? And because I start my day early, I still have enough time left. When we started Indifi, I think for the first 4 or 5 years, we were working on Saturdays. Now we have partial working Saturdays. So I don't think time availability for personal is an issue. I have this quasi professional piece, angel investing, Plaksha. These are kind of not my professional pursuits, but my extracurricular pursuits. And then I have my set of hobbies and passions that I'm
What are they?
Music, staying fit. So I've been running as in not running a business, but physically running for about 17, 18 years now. Picked up badminton along the way. I'm learning how to fly a plane. Again, I like to do new things. Right. So
What's your running routine like?
So now I'm winding down my running a little bit, but
To create space for other things,
for
or
strength and workout. So I would get out there 5 to 6 days a week, right? So a couple of days run, 3 days strength training, couple of days badminton. Some of those overlap. Summertime swimming will be fine. So, but yeah, I just like to kind of dabble in different things.
I must like switch to a different set of questions here. What does fitness mean to you?
I think the motivation for me to kind of be in that space is largely driven by being able as you get old, right? So I think when I first started to run, and I'm not a quote unquote sports person, right? I would have been at about that 35-year mark. My friends were running, I was running, and I really started to enjoy it. It was at that time almost like meditative for me, of saying this is my time.
I've just started reading Murakami's What I Think About when I'm running.
Acha,
It's
nahi, I haven't
a
read that.
fantastic. Like
Is
I
it?
think you'll really appreciate
Okay.
it because he talks about. He also took to running fairly later. I think in his mid-30s, and he also talks about what the process of running is and what's going on in his mind when he's running. I'll definitely send you a copy.
Sure,
But
sure.
sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
So you're
So
talking
that is
about
where
what
I got
fitness
started.
means. Yeah.
And then over the last 3 to 4 years, I think the bias has become more towards being a little bit more scientific about it and kind of doing what helps you stay able, right?
Is there Or are there metrics that you look at to assess how fit you are?
Yeah, yeah.
What are your favorites?
So strength is strength. So they're kind of a
How
library
much
of
you're
routines.
lifting or anything like
Yeah,
that?
I'm not a big lifter, but squats, right? Push-ups, planks, right? Core, lower body, right? I think uh, between everything, I'm still not an upper body fan. Um, uh,
But is there like a metric kind of thing that you look at to see, I mean, where you are today versus 6 months ago,
yeah, so the
etc.?
numbers, repetitions, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. The second one is your uh, respiratory fitness.
Hmm.
Right.
VO2 max.
So VO2 max. I've done a
Are you
DEXA, but I'm not
okay? Oh,
intending on doing
DEXA
it as a
scans.
regular. Yeah, yeah.
All
Uh,
right. Are there
so
any favorite fitness habits that have served you well?
see, I think the biggest one is to get out there every day, right? So as long as I think you can do that, I think then the relative merit of saying what are you doing is
So showing
relatively
up
small.
is first most
Showing up
important.
is 80% of the gig. And I think for me, for most part, I show up either if I'm enjoying something or if I have a commitment I've made. So, for example, for my workouts, I have a trainer, not because I need the trainer, but
It's
because
the commitment.
I'll show up. Right.
Are there any books on fitness or anything that
Fair
you've
bit,
read?
fair bit. Yeah. So my favorite is the Peter Attia podcast.
Hmm.
I draw a
And the
lot of it.
book Outlive.
Yeah.
Are
So
you a paid subscriber to Peter Attia as well?
not yet, not yet, not yet. But yeah, I think a lot of the framework of how I think about that goal to stay able comes from what I've learned there. I've heard other people. I've heard the longevity side of the house. I don't find it very compelling. Uh, so yeah, and I've experimented a little bit around. But again, the simplest thing seems to work the best. Yeah.
Is there any kind of a physical product or service that you use which you swear by when it comes to fitness?
Ah, just good exercise, good nutrition.
Also, you're not like a gadget
No,
product
I
kind
wouldn't
of
call
person.
myself that. I have my basic running watch, but I did try on the. So I've experimented with a bunch of
Oh,
things.
the
CGM.
uh,
So
con-
it was all good. So yeah. So
all
yeah,
right.
I keep dabbling within my family. I'm probably the one who experiments the most. But yeah, on the scale out there, I'll be 5 on 10 on experimentation.
Last couple of questions. On a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you with your life?
I've been very lucky. So I have a lot of gratitude. And yeah, I think most days, most of the time, with most of the things, I'm very happy.
It's a 1 to 10 scale.
Okay. Um, 8.
Wow, why did you not go for 10 if you're really happy? Why limit yourself to
I
8?
would. I don't think I would answer 10 to anything. Right?
But your answer was unequivocal. You said
Yeah.
most days I'm happy. It sounded like a 10, but the moment I asked you to rate yourself on a
I
scale, you
think
reduce yourself
I
to
think the
8.
possibility of something better happening is what drives an entrepreneur, right?
All right, I'll ask my last question, which is on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you rate yourself as the chairman and MD of Indifi and as a parent?
7
On both?
on both.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll have to ask my investors how they rate me on the first one, but
And your daughter's about the 7.
my daughters have told me that. Yeah.
Oh, they've told you. Great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right. On that note, thank you so much, Alok, for being on the show. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Rohin.
First Principles is a team effort. Rajiv CN, our resident sound engineer who mixes and masters our sound and audio, and Hari Krishna, who produces and researches the episodes. Also, we at First Principles love feedback, and I'm being honest here. And over the last few weeks, listeners have written to us with their suggestions, feedback, and even things they find slightly or sometimes more than slightly annoying. So, thank you. We're still going through them and making a note of all the things we should be doing differently to make First Principles even better. But this doesn't have to mean you stop writing to us at fp@theken.com. The more you write in with your opinions, the better we can make the show for you. So please continue writing to us. And while I still have you here, if you love listening to First Principles, please rate us on your favorite podcast streaming platform. It helps us reach much more like-minded people like you. I'm Rohin Dharmakumar, your host, and I'll see you next Thursday with a new episode.